Hi, g'day, Steph. This is
Hi,
a
Graham.
interview to discuss sort of what you've learnt while you've been on placement at Inverary. And I was just going to go through some questions and just make sure that we've embedded the knowledge. So, can you talk about the three areas of holistic management? So, the decision making, the financials, just a brief overview of the financials, and then some of the grazing stuff that you've been doing. So, what would be the minimum viable material you need to do the holistic decision making?
With the decision making, it's all about avoiding unintended consequences.
Excellent.
Um, so every change you make has an effect, and um, we don't want the effects to be disastrous for either our work-life balance, financials, or landscape function, or animal health and performance. So that's why test areas are fantastic in terms of getting the feedback, in terms of what changes, what the consequences of changes can make.
Yeah, so, in terms of the context, what would be a minimum viable context?
That, for example, for this farm business, we want it profitable. We want it to be constantly increasing in landscape function, and we want cow performance to be, high, good. We want animal, cow welfare to be good, and we also, being humans, we also want to have reasonable work-life balance and be able to factor in normal human things that keep us happy.
Yeah, so what are some of the testing questions and what do you remember of that? Or checking questions, sorry, I'm using the old language.
Um, so, I guess for any decision, um, will this increase my profit? Will it increase my landscape function? Will it increase my animal health and performance? And will it make my life easier in terms of workload?
Yeah, so what are some of those questions though? Do you remember you actually asked specific questions? So, what's one of the key ones? If you're treating a problem, do you go for the cause or the solution?
Or what is the root
Yeah,
cause of the
yeah,
problem? And
yeah. So cause and effect, sort of best use of your time and money. That future
I'm
resource
looking for the
base.
weak link
Yeah.
in anything in terms of progressing. You're only as good as your weakest link. So if we push from the weakest link, and we're always pushing, push that weakest link up until it's no longer the weakest link, and then concentrate on now what is my weakest link, and you know
Sort of.
always
So like,
pushing
yeah,
towards
prioritizing
better.
those expenses towards the weak link and stuff. What about the weak link biological? Are
Um,
you familiar with that one?
so in terms of the actual physical farm and landscape and the pasture, it might be we're not growing enough feed, or we're not improving landscape function, or we don't have enough litter, or we're not heading towards perenniality or diversity. So that can often link back to your practice areas
Yeah.
to decide, what is different between what I'm doing in the paddock and what happened in the practice area, and how can I get more of the good things that I'm seeing in my practice area in my paddock.
Yeah. So what's generally the weak link in terms of a lot of your annual forby weeds? What point would you target?
Um, it might be that I was coming back too soon, not
Yeah.
enough recovery time,
Yeah, it's usually like with weeds, it's
or
usually
bare
at
areas.
germination. So the weak link in the life cycle of a weed is usually at germination. And the weak link in a lot of the animals is actually at reproduction. So you target those too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we can sort of reduce unintended consequences. Have you got any comments on the financials and what you've picked up from there?
I guess whenever you're making a decision on the farm, we need to think about, is this change, is this procedure, is it going to increase our profitability? So
And reduce risk. So,
and reduce risk.
yeah.
So it's end of April currently, and we've had our autumn break and a little bit of follow-up rain. But before, between January and now, it's been pretty dry, and the cow performance on dry fodder has, they're working hard, but we have lost body condition.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of making decisions about what we were going to do in terms of getting cow performance, health and performance back up to get them, through lactation and then back up in condition enough to cycle again, to get pregnant again in July, we discussed the various options. So, do we need a destock? Which cows and how much, how much do we need to destock? As opposed to, we went through all options. Do we need to fertilise to get greater, leaf, develop more, grow more leaf area? Do we need to buy in hay? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to drove somewhere? So, all those different options, they have different, some are profitable, some are not profitable. So selling off, selling stock, you can sell the worst ones. That's heading towards, generally your herd's moving towards being better for your, better under your management style. So, and selling animals makes money. So I would say yes, that is within my financial context.
So which is the financial weak link at the moment here? So the three are sort of growing grass, having the right numbers, or marketing.
The marketing could be one. Currently, the stock is sold into the, just sold at the sales with every other, Angus and cow in the area. So, whereas here, these are organically managed grass only and could easily be marketed into a higher value point of sales.
Is there any animals that are finished, ready to go at the moment?
There is a few, and they could definitely go to the meat trade.
Yep.
Which would reduce, reducing our herd size will lower their pasture utilisation per day. We can lengthen out our recovery time again, which will lower our rainfall risk and therefore risk of financial risk in the
What are the three main risks?
In terms of
so debt's number one, and then the next one down is rainfall, and then the third one is market price. So
okay.
That's bit of activity.
Debt, rainfall, market price.
Yeah, and that's the order that they go as well.
Yep.
So it's really that's good. Okay, and now a bit on the grazing, sort of. So if you were advising someone about the grazing, what order would you start discussing that with them?
I think the first point of call would be, do you have a practice area?
Yeah.
Could you put one in?
Yeah, so a practice area could go in first, and then what would you start thinking about?
Then, how many mobs do you have? And how is that? Could, if you have more than one, could the number of mobs be reduced?
Yeah.
Then, how many paddocks do you have, and how long is your recovery time?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to increase your stock density and lengthen your recovery time?
Yeah. So that could be summarised under that enterprise design for sort of making sure that you can have as fewer mobs as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got your practice areas feeding back into your sort of recovery time, so that you're basing your decisions on evidence, not just on gut feel. And then what about some of the what are some of the next steps that you'd go through?
In terms of the grazing.
Yeah.
I guess a big part of what I've been doing here is animal monitoring.
Yes.
So the cows, they spend most of the time grazing. We want them filled up. So on the left side of the cow, there's a triangle behind the ribs and in front of the hips, which is a kind of window to the rumen.
Mm-hmm.
And depending how filled or empty that triangle is, tells us how much food is in the rumen at any given time, and we ideally want that as like full all the time. They're on generally quite mature fodder, so it's high in fibre. They need to spend a lot of time digesting that, processing that to get energy out of that to, produce milk and build muscle and fat. So we need them full all the time.
Yep.
I'm always looking at that rumen
fill.
I'm also looking at...
Is that a leading indicator of anything, the gut fill? Rumen fill?
It's a good indicator of animal health.
Yeah.
We want it, if the rumen fill is very low, like we often see in dairy cattle, and also that the dung score is very low, so really runny poos as opposed to, firmer kind of pats that hold their shape or even firmer than that. It is a good indicator that the rumen is passing food through it really, really fast, too fast. and if the rumen is passing food through really fast, probably we don't have enough fibre in the diet. It's not great in terms of their intestinal health, or often if we've got a lot of starchy, high protein foods moving through the rumen quickly, often the rumen pH is too low, which is a big cow health issue. Chronically, it leads to terrible cow health and cow performance.
Those sort of metabolic diseases.
Yep.
And so how are you scoring the dung?
So I'll do a bit of a observation of the cow pats when I move the cattle. So a 3, which, we want ideally 3 and firmer. So it should be a pat that has a bit of shape and a little dimple in the middle.
Perfect. So
standard 3.
What was I thinking? What about the water?
When cows go up to the trough, ideally it's only in 1s or 2s. They should most of the time be at that fence front just eating, and then if they need a drink, they go up in 1s and 2s back to the trough.
Yep.
We want them to be drinking like they're, really there to glug, 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 really want to fill up. I think 70 glugs down. We don't want sipping, we don't want sniffing, we just want like slurp, 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 slurp.
Yeah, perfect. What about contentment?
We don't want yelling or kind of anxious or angry or disturbed mooing. At the moment, they're often calling to their babies because they forget where they leave them. So there is a bit of that, but it's mainly them calling to their children rather than because they're trying to tell us something. Sometimes they are, but it's mostly calling for the babies.
Okay.
If they're really hungry, which we should be able to tell by rumen fill, then they will often be yelling. If they're really content, they'll often be lying down, sitting down, just chewing cud in a really happy place.
So that gut fill's sort of a leading indicator of body condition score, isn't it? So if we know that they're getting good gut fills and dung scores, then we can predict what the body condition score will be in the future.
somewhat.
Yeah.
Depending on, so even if the cow has a high cow energy value, like a lot of modern cows are designed for like total ration feeding in your high like in some of the dairy TMR, total mixed ration feeding in like high intensity dairy or feedlot performance. Often, even if you've got good rumen fill and good dung scoring, is not reflected in a good condition score. So they still, even with that good dung score, good rumen fill, they might still have a condition score of 2, just because their energy requirements of that particular model of cow is too high to be maintained on fodder which is inherently healthy for a cow to eat.
What would be a definition of perennial grass recovery? What have you been working at here?
A recovered perennial grass should look like an ungrazed plant, so no chopped off tips where they've been grazed. So they all should be new leaves that have come up, and they should have litter, which was the previously grazed leaves that have become the litter. And ideally it should have visible fungal attack in the litter layer.
Yeah, so that high landscape function is large basal areas of the perennials with decomposing litter in the intertussock space. So that's good. So what's that? What is it that we're actually talking about with that production of litter? What's it known in the literature as?
Litter is directly related to leaf emergence. So in a ryegrass plant, it will have 3 growing leaves, and then when it sends up the 4th one, the first one will die off and become litter. So it only ever has 3 actively growing leaves per tiller.
What are the main drivers? What are the 2 main drivers of leaf emergence rate?
Moisture and temperature.
Yep, perfect.
If we add fertiliser, it increases the area per leaf, so it'll be bigger leaves, but it won't make the next one come up any quicker.
Okay.
So that's something really important to consider. Just because we add fertiliser doesn't mean we can come back around quicker. Might mean we can stay along because we've got more biomass to eat through, but we should be really keeping that recovery time based on our definition of an ungrazed grass plant.
Perfect. So do you feel like you could manage cows at someone else's property?
I think so.
Well, I'd agree with that as well.
I think it would be a bit stressful, and I don't know if there's many cows that are as nice as these ones.
But yeah, I'd agree that you could do that.
I don't think anything would die.
No. They might run you
You
over.
can keep them all alive and reasonably healthy, and I would certainly know what are the big things that those kind of warning signs when I need to take action and adjust my management.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Graham.